Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to this session of readings from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, the magnificent dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna in the battlefield of Kurukshetra just prior to the beginning of Kali Yuga, an age that is characterized by a human society whose consciousness is, is degraded and degrading and moving further and further away from its original pure state of knowledge and understanding. And it is an age which is characterized by laziness of the spirit to pursue spiritual pursuits for understanding the spiritual reality of life, and a life which is characterized by hypocrisy, quarrel, um, then anger, envy, jealousy in higher degrees, and greed and selfishness, and so on and so forth, which gets reflected in the environment, not just in the physical environment, but in all aspects of life. So, and the resultant kind of consequences that one has to face. One has, and also, of course, very short lifespans and shorter memories, and so on and so forth. So, in this dialogue, through Arjuna, actually, Lord Krishna instructs the people of Kali Yuga, reminds the people of Kali Yuga about the absolute reality of life, about the objective of receiving the human form, about the five most important subject matters that the human being must understand, and that is Ishvara, Prakriti, Jiva, karma, that is thought, word, and deed, activities of thought, word, and deed, and kala, the operation of time. And also, how one can rescue the consciousness and elevate it back to its original state and actually focus on the actual purpose of receiving a human body. With that, it is time to recite the verse, offering obeisances to the spiritual master and to all spiritual masters seeking their blessings. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and the spiritual master of opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him and to all spiritual masters. And with that, it is time to recite the verses for today, which are verses 46 and 47. But before we do that, a very quick recap on what Lord Krishna has touched upon in the previous verses. So, just a quick reminder that the Bhagavad Gita, just to get the thread back into the readings, the Bhagavad Gita actually is a discourse of Lord Krishna to Arjuna in response to Arjuna's questions, or rather his arguments, to avoid fighting in the battle. And the arguments that Arjuna had preferred were based on his, compassion. He didn't want to kill his kinsman, especially his respectable, his worshipable elders. And then Lord Krishna had explained that the compassion that you're showing is for the clothes of the person and not the person himself or herself, because the human body is like the clothes one wears and then discards when it grows like old, or for some reason kind of dirty, or polluted. So the clothes your kinsmen are currently wearing are getting dirty and polluted. That means the clothes of the mind and the body, if not the body, at least the mind, is getting polluted. And so it's time to discard them. It's so, and when you're discarding them, you're not really killing anybody, because the soul never dies, and what exists never dies, and what is temporary and perishable cannot really be considered to exist. And then he goes on to explain to Lord Krishna that the spirit is imperishable. On the other hand, matter is perishable and destructible. So there is it is so there is no reason to lament for something that will not die in any case. Okay. And then, so this is like the Sankhya part of the Bhagavad Gita, summary of that. And then he goes on to say, this was from 11 to 31. And then after that, he goes on to explain. Then Arjuna had said that, there is like, but then, and second is, if all my kinsmen die, then even if I win in the battle, there will be no enjoyment. I will be miserable. Because who will I enjoy my victory with? So this was an argument on a lower platform than the earlier one, because the earlier one was, this was Arjuna, the devotee, speaking, because the devotee is characterized by compassion for fellow beings. And the second one is based on me, like, how will I enjoy? I'll be miserable. So then Lord Krishna says that, you think that you'll be miserable if you kill your kinsman, but actually you'll be miserable if you do as you say you want to do, that is, run away and then live the life of a beggar or a sannyasi, because that is not your intrinsic nature. That is not your characteristic. And everyone has like different intrinsic characteristics, their guna, and based on their gunas and and karmas. So if you do not act according to your intrinsic psychological characteristic, or your physical like aptitudes and attitudes, you will be miserable. And then, and even if you are able to do it well externally, there will be you will not be in rhythm. The physical system, the psychological system, and the spiritual system will not be in harmony. And that will be reflected one way or the other in the environment, and you'll be miserable anyway. So, but doing your duty, which is, you are a Kshatriya, so doing your duty, of it, performing your duty will give you satisfaction, and that is how you will actually, that is how you not be miserable. So performing your duty according to religious principles, for preservation of religious principles, for upholding religious principles, that is what is actually going to give you satisfaction. So that was the argument, that was the counter argument. And then he had said that, that I will incur sin. So even that, the same argument, and I will not go to heavenly planets. So this is again based on enjoyment of the physical, circumstances, material circumstances. One usually wants to go to heaven to enjoy better facilities, material facilities, to be, and that is, and if one incurs sin, one is not able to go there. And so he's saying that actually, if you don't perform your duty as a Kshatriya, that is when actually you will not be able to go to heaven. And because that is what the Dharma Shastras and the law of nature, that is how it's been kind of arranged. And Dharma Shastras based on the law of nature, or the eternal, certain eternal, Dharma Shastras are based on certain eternal principles. And if you want to go to heaven, then you have to live according to the Dharma Shastras. And by not performing your duty as a Kshatriya, you'll not go to the heavenly planets anyway. And then he had argued that, certain karma kanda activities, which are actually to be performed as per the Dharma Shastras, to kind of and are, in families, and these family traditions are actually and the principles of family or family traditions based on the principles of the Dharma Shastras, which are actually maintained, sustained, preserved, and transmitted by the elders in the family, that will be destroyed, because there will be no one to train the young and the women and protect the women. So then that the women will be degraded, and the young will therefore be not trained well, because generally the transmitters and the preservers, maintainers are the women. They spend most of the time with their children and with the young, and so they will not know what to do, what not to do, because they will not be trained. And when they become degraded, when women become degraded, they will be, or polluted, dushta, then there will be Varna Shankara. And Varna Shankara is unwanted progeny, or a progeny that is not the result of planning, because as the Bhagavad Gita progresses, you'll know that families are supposed to be planned, and parents should become parents only after they understand what is the purpose of human life, and that is only when they are going to be able to train their progeny in the correct manner to achieve a holistically kind of fulfilled and satisfied life that will gradually take them to the ultimate purpose of human existence. And so that will not happen. And both young men and women will become frivolous, and that'll have a society will degrade as a result. And, and people will move further and further away from their spiritual goal, with resultant consequences upon them and upon the environment, human environment, upon human society at large. So, and then not only will society degrade, but even the forefathers who benefit because of the ancestors, who benefit because of certain rituals that are performed for them, they will also suffer. So, and the result, there will be an impact on that, on families in this planet as well. So that will also be affected. So that is the argument Arjuna had given, and then Lord Krishna actually goes on to say that Arjuna, and that is what we have been reading, that Arjuna, of course, what you say is right, and human civilization, when it is in the lower stages, required to perform karmakandas, that is, rituals in the Vedas, and these rituals are actually, or sacrifices. These are karmakanda sacrifices. They are actually based on the Dharma Shastras, and they are supposed to be performed by human society when it is in the lower consciousness. But then we have to rise above that. I mean, but they are not the ultimate goal of human existence. The goal of human existence is much higher than that, and so you at least, must, as a Kshatriya and in charge of states of governing a state, ensuring the welfare, overall holistic welfare of your subjects, you at least must understand that it is important to transcend the karmakandas, which are actually not meant, which are not the actual goal of life, though they have to be performed when human society, human civilization is in the lower stages. And just to give you an idea of what the lower stages of civilization actually means, I'll just share what I heard in a lecture, a very interesting lecture, and it was said that generally there is a shastra which is called the Hitopadesha, and in the Hitopadesha it is said that ahar, nidra, bhay, maithun. These are what human, the ahar, that is eating or food, nidra, that is sleep, bhay, that is fear, and maithun, that is reproduction, or that these are actually functions which human society shares with animals. A human being, or the human body, human form, shares with animals or animal society. So in performing these, there is no difference between the animals and the human bodies, those souls and human bodies. But then then the next line of that statement says that, but what distinguishes a human being as opposed to someone in human form, as a soul in human form? A human being, however, is one who understands dharma, or who lives life in accordance with dharma. That means dharma, understanding the eternal, certain eternal laws of life. So, in understanding the eternal laws of life, that is what distinguish. And this understanding, however, the animal bodies are not capable of that. That is, the body, which is made up of the physical form, and the subtle body, that is mind, ego, and intelligence of the human being, is such that it is capable of doing more than the animal functions, which animals, by their default constitution, the way they are constituted, they are not able to do. They'll have to evolve through 84 lakh species, lower species. Then the soul actually evolves through 84 lakh species to undergo its the evolution evolves through 84 lakh species in terms of not just bodies, but in terms of consciousness, to ultimately achieve the actual purpose of life on earth, on this material, in this material world. And the human form is one, which is actually the form that is provided by material nature, or by the Supreme, through which that kind of evolution or reconnection back to the original consciousness of the soul in this material world can take place. So if the human form, what distinguishes the human form from the animal form is dharma, is religion, and of course spiritual understanding through religion, and by which the consciousness gradually evolves or reconnects with its original state, and then one is able to achieve a state of liberation, or from the cycle of birth, death, old age, and misery, in a world, especially in the Kali Yuga, which will constantly degrade to a point where, because the consciousness is degraded, it will be impossible, or life will become very, very difficult as time passes. So that is how the universe is set. So the ability to kind of rescue the consciousness and to escape from further and further, having to, take birth and then, move to old age and disease and death in such degrading, more and more degrading circumstances, can be escaped if one reconnects with one's original consciousness and actually find what people seek, and that is, eternality, never to die, and bliss, eternal happiness. So it is one doesn't look for that here. One actually tries to liberate the consciousness and rescue the consciousness from being focused in matter to being focused within, and to reconnect with the original consciousness. And that is where actually people actually get what they seek. So that is what was being explained. So and then again, then about dharma, it was said that in the lower stages, when the human body shares the same similar functions as the animals, that is eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and then that is the lowest stage of civilization. And then this is in an animal state, and people want to satisfy their these requirements. That means they want these eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. These are, these are actually functions which are for satisfaction of the senses. And to satisfy their senses in a world where resources get, more, to eat one needs more resources, to sleep in better and better conditions, better and better houses, one needs more resources. To to actually enjoy, the senses for, other kind of for and fearing, that means because of insecurity, then one also wants to gather more and more resources, and then for reproduction and to maintain children and family, etc. One needs more and more resources. But because the consciousness is low, there is the fight for resources are and they fighting for resources, it becomes very animalistic, and there is competition for resources. And when this competition becomes one would not like to compete in a beastly manner, because that will lead the human beings to a state where they're of total chaos, because everybody would be fighting with everybody else like cats and dogs for the resources, which get more and more scarce. So therefore one requires a system, and therefore to kind of ensure that this competition for resources, or this need for resources, is achieved, but in a way that is not harmful to the human being. And therefore one has these dharma shastras, which are based on understanding of the eternal laws, and where these requirements of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, that is the religious aspect, the aspect of leading life according to certain eternal laws, dharma, varnash, swadharma, artha, that is economics, economic needs, and kama, and one's desires, fulfillment of one's material desires, and moksha, and finally liberation from these, are kind of integrated into life in such a way that those four functions are fulfilled, but in a way that is through a system, so that gradually, while living through that system, one's consciousness, one also begins to gradually understand the actual purpose of life, and the consciousness gets elevated. And then from the lower stage, one goes to the next stage of consciousness, higher stage, and then to the next stage of higher stage, and the next stage, which is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. So dharma shastras and these different yagyas that are prescribed in the dharma shastras are is a system, is actually a system whereby these material requirements of the human body are fulfilled, of the mind and the physical body, human body, of the subtle body and the gross body, is fulfilled. And at the same time, there's a system through which it is fulfilled. And therefore, this is done in a very non-competitive way, because it's also done in a regulated way, regulated by the principles that are explained in the dharma shastras, and accordingly by performing rituals, which automatically brings one in knowledge. And there is a purport by Srila Prabhupada in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which also explains what happens in Kali Yuga, or what happens when people decide that gratification of the senses, that means performing these animal functions itself, becomes a goal. And then what happens? People then devise an alternative system. But this alternative system that people devise is created by humans, by human beings. And human beings are not perfect. They are subject to 4 defects. And that is, they are misled by their senses. The senses cannot understand the actual reality of life. I mean, for example, if you look at the sun, only through the senses, that is through the eyes, then one would see that the sun is, just a tiny kind of a disk. But it is when one is in knowledge that one, even if it is material knowledge, one understands the sun is a huge globe. And so senses are defective. Human senses are defective. And then there is a, propensity for human beings to cheat. That means to pretend to understand more than they do, because inevitably the human being is very tiny and finite in comparison to the actual material universe, which is actually 1/3 of the total kind of creation of the Supreme. So then, there is a kind of a false kind of projection of understanding of things. So this is in a way cheating. So there are certain characteristics like this. And then there's a tendency to kind of so there are two others which I have I have to you'll know as we progress. So they are subject to these 4 kind of defects, and so therefore the only material understanding is insufficient, and so therefore with this insufficient understanding, when an alternative kind of system is arranged, which is different from what is prescribed in the Dharma Shastras, which are based on understanding of the eternal principles of life, even of material life, then society is bound to degrade. I mean, not only does society move away from the spiritual goals, where people become lazy, etc., etc., then, they move away from the actual spiritual goals. And the result of a degraded spirit is actually reflected in an environment, which then environment, not just the physical environment, but the social and political and other environment, which then requires protecting. And, it becomes there is conflict and there's war, and then there is so again, in a way, it is animalistic, because, this is and Mahabharata itself took place because consciousness was degrading. So gradually, from the Satya Yuga, there's a degradation of consciousness, and then one moved to the Treta Yuga, and then to the Dwapar Yuga, and then finally to Kali Yuga, each with, progressively degrading stages of consciousness because of the operation of time, and because that is how the material world is. So in the Kali Yuga, when people because Prabhupada had explained that when industrial civilization, industrial revolution took place, and people realized that these needs, which were earlier performed through the Dharma Shastras, and therefore it was done in a regulated way, could be, or not just industrial revolution, as technology developed, as people were able to fulfill their needs, their economic needs and their other needs, without even taking recourse to Dharma Shastras, when they were able to do that, then they arrange an alternative system. But because the human being, the empirical knowledge is not sufficient, and in understanding the eternal principles of life, the eternal laws of life, therefore, there is society will inevitably degrade further and further, and there will be more conflicts, more wars, and degraded kind of life that will be reflected in the family, in the society, in the community, in different aspects. So this will inevitably take place. There is a huge purport there by Srila Prabhupada, which I'll of course read out one day. And then so therefore in the lower stages, society actually requires to perform these functions, these Dharma Shastras, that Karma Kanda that Arjuna had spoken about. Because otherwise, the alternative system, say policing and all these that we require now, and Aadhaar cards and and the core banking, and income tax through a centralized system so that people don't cheat, etc., etc. This is actually an alternative system to ensure that there is, to minimize conflict, to minimize cheating, to minimize but this is an expensive system, and this is a complicated system. But the system that is like organized by the Dharma Shastras, that is based on self-regulation, because as one understands the actual purpose of life, one automatically regulates oneself from within. And this is like external regulation, all these dharma shastras, etc., that which are now systems which are being devised. I mean, there will be consequences when one is performing the sacrifices. One understands that there will be consequences if one doesn't follow certain principles, and that is, therefore, one regulates oneself from within. And of course, the systems that are being devised now by industrial society are external regulations, where people are saying that if you don't do this, you will be you'll have to face consequences. So, but this external kind of system is very complicated, very expensive, and very, very it'll just require more and more expensive kind of systems to be devised, because the internal consciousness is not regulated by through understanding of the principles of life. So therefore, it is important for these karmakanda activities to be performed so that there is internal regulation in terms of competition for resources. But then again, it is also said that to compete for resources, in this, according to Dharma Shastra, also is actually not possible for people of the Kali Yuga, because even to do that requires a certain level of purity of consciousness, and of course a lot of dravyas, a lot of things which people of Kali Yuga cannot afford. So for the Kali Yuga, there's a particular system, the internal regulation, that is a yajna that is prescribed, and that is nama yajna, that is like chanting of the holy name, so that by doing that mantra meditation, one purifies the consciousness, and then internal regulation automatically, one is able to perform that. So internal regulation is actually what is ultimately going to result in reflect as a better environment outside, without need for too much external policing and external control. And of course, the decision-making process will be such that the environment will not need protecting, as people are now gradually realizing that we have to protect the environment. We have to plant trees and so on. But planting trees, just a few trees here and there, will not protect the environment. It will require that the animal functions, understanding that eating, sleeping, mating, defending, these are functions that the body it is a part of the function of the body. But then the human body must become a human being, and that to become a human being, one must understand the eternal principles of life, and then regulate those functions in such a way that the competition for resources become less. And when competition for resources become less, then all these wars and conflicts, which are ultimately the result of competition for the resources which are becoming scarcer and scarcer because of overconsumption, that is automatically going to be regulated through internal checks and balances. Of course, the external checks and balances will also have to be there, but then internal checks and balances will aid the process, and that is actually the solution. Otherwise, the senses can take people anywhere and everywhere. So therefore, in the lower stages of human civilization, these karmakanda activities are necessary, but these are for the lower stages, when we are very close to the animal society in terms of consciousness. But then through Dharma Shastra, one needs to move up from there. But then that is not the purpose of human existence as well, because the purpose of human existence is to move above the three modes which actually result in these kind of conflicts, and to focus on the actual goal of life. And so then Lord Krishna had said, Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna. So one has to, the material life where consciousnesses are at the animalistic stage, and the human society, what distinguishes human society is performance of activities according to Dharma Shastras, which take them away from that animalistic stage, which is actually governed by the three modes of material nature, sattva, raja, and tama. And then to rise above that, to become to raise up, is actually the purpose of human life. So then your karma kanda argument is how it is being countered by Lord Krishna. And so now we come to verse 46, which says here, Yavan artha udapane sarvata sampluttodake tavan sarveshu vedeshu brahmanasya vijanata. All purposes served by a small well can at once be served by a great reservoir of water. Similarly, all the purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that the rituals and sacrifices mentioned in the Karmakanda division of the Vedic literature are meant to encourage gradual development of self-realization. So by performing these Karmakanda activities to fulfill one's requirements for dharma, for artha and kama, and also for through dharma to achieve moksha, these are actually meant to encourage gradual elevation or development of self-realization. And the purpose of self-realization, what is that purpose, is clearly stated in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita in verse 15, which says that the purpose of studying the Vedas and also to perform all these Karmakanda rituals is to understand Lord Krishna, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the primeval cause of everything. And so self-realization ultimately means understanding Krishna, or the Supreme Lord, and one's eternal relationship with him. So that is the ultimate objective of life, and that is the ultimate purpose, the actual, the higher purpose of performing the Karmakanda activities, whose immediate purpose, which is actually done because one has desires, and to fulfill those desires, these are done. And then as one is performing these activities on a regular basis, because things are being explained, one's consciousness kind of elevates, and also because of the mantras that are chanted, the consciousness gets purified, and one is able to understand that, and then one is able to gradually understand, be self-realized. The relationship of the living entity with Krishna is also mentioned in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita in the 7th verse. So it is explained that the living entities are parts and parcels of Krishna, and therefore revival of Krishna consciousness or God consciousness by the individual living entity is the highest perfectional stage of Vedic knowledge. And this is also confirmed in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 3rd canto, 33rd chapter, 7th verse, as follows. Aho bata sva pacho ato gariyan yaj jivagre vartate namatubhyam tepustapas te juhuva shashnur arya brahmanuchur nama grinantiyete. So it is said, the translation is, O my Lord, a person who is chanting your holy name, although born of a low family like that of a Chandala, or even someone in the stage that is outside the scope of Vedic sacrifices. There were people even earlier who were not capable of performing these Vedic sacrifices. So then they are situated in the highest, even they can be situated in the highest stages of self-realization. That means even people who are outside the lowest classification of society according to Varnashrama, who are called Chandalas, they also can reach the highest stage of self-realization simply by chanting your holy name, by chanting the holy name of the Lord, in whatever way one chants it. And such a person must have performed all kinds of penances and sacrifices according to Vedic rituals and studied the Vedic literatures many, many times after taking his bath in all the holy places of pilgrimage. And such a person is considered to be the best of Aryan families. But to actually be able to chant the holy name, it is being explained here, such a person in his previous lives must have performed a lot of Vedic rituals and studied the Vedic literatures and also taken a bath in the holy places of pilgrimage many, many times to actually attain that stage of purity in this current life, where even staying outside the Varnashrama classification of society, one is able to chant the holy name of the Supreme Lord. So chanting the holy name of the Supreme Lord is only possible for people who in their previous lives have brought themselves up to that state where they are they are receptive to the holy name. And those who have not performed sufficiently all these activities, not studied the Vedas enough, they generally they find it very difficult. And this is for most people in the Kali Yuga. That is the Kali Yuga consciousness. So one must be intelligent enough to understand the purpose of the Vedas without being attached to the rituals only, and must not desire to be elevated even to the heavenly kingdoms for a better quality of sense gratification, because here the competition of resources only for the gratification of the senses, that is to sleep, to eat better and better, to sleep in better and better conditions, more sophisticated conditions, and to have better facilities for reproduction, producing side effects as Prabhupada calls it, and then defending, that means providing for their security, by earning more and more, competing more and more for resources, thinking then that will provide security. But then actually that does not provide security in the last analysis, because even for those who have a lot of material resources, they ultimately, they are looking for they look for something else. And that is why even in very developed countries where material resources, people have sufficient material resources, they are now taking recourse to things like yoga, because in search of a system where they are gradually beginning to realize that we need to regulate. So they are performing yoga for the wrong reasons, but still the understanding is growing that self-regulation is necessary. So that is anyway the purpose of the Karmakanda. So self-regulation is important. So it is not possible for the man in this age, however, to follow all the rules and regulations of Vedic rituals, and nor is it possible to study all the Vedanta and the Upanishads thoroughly, because this requires much time, energy, knowledge, and resources to execute the purposes of the Vedas, and this is hardly possible in this age, Prabhupada writes. So the best purpose of Vedic culture is served. So Vedic culture was very systematic, ensured for fulfillment of the various desires of the human body through certain regulated means by performing karmakanda, which also require people to study. But all this is not possible for this age because resources are scarce, becoming scarcer and scarcer. In Satya Yuga was the age of gold. Gold was available in plenty. Then gradually the gold became scarce, so then we came to the silver age, the Treta Yuga, where silver was in plenty, gold had become scarce, and then the copper age, the Dwapar age, where gold and silver were becoming scarce, and then now we come to the Iron Age. So and that's why gold and silver and copper are so expensive, because there is overconsumption, and as a result of overconsumption and gradual decrease in self-regulation, so more decrease in self-regulation, the more resources are expended, and then as a result there is more competition. So there is competition between nation and nation, society and society, community and community, family and family, and then individual and individual as well. So therefore regulation, ultimately not external regulation so much, but internal regulation based on the actual purpose of human life, which is not to tamper with the earth, with the planet so much. The planet is there, the resources are there to live in a simple way, performing one's functions as per one's dharma, that is, one's internal kind of intrinsic kind of qualities and tendencies, uh, uh, through by integrating the material and the spiritual in such a way that leads one to the highest purpose of human life. That is actually what will lead to kind of the solution, which is actually the solution to all the problems of human life, and then which of course which is how the Vedic culture was organized. And however, or because all those purposes of Vedic culture through rituals is not possible now, as Prabhupada writes, because it is that kind of time and energy people are incapable of expending, and this kind of resources people don't have. But nevertheless, these purposes can be fulfilled in a simple way, and that is by chanting the holy name of the Lord. So and then so that itself will fulfill the function, the ultimate goal of the Vedic Karmakanda rituals, that is purification of consciousness. And as the consciousness gradually gets purified through chanting the name of the Supreme Lord, and then understanding that there is need for self-regulation in terms of food habits, in terms of sleeping, what time one sleeps, how one sleeps, according to natural cycles, and etc., etc. Gradually, like human health also will be restored, and the mental health will also be restored. So that way, as it was explained in the class, that people are regulating themselves through yoga, because they realize that by not performing certain functions which are actually the body must perform, and not only machines, the body is getting kind of degraded. And so the people are going to gyms because they have plenty of resources at home and they don't have to do any work. So then people are going to the gym to work, because the body needs kind of activity. And if the body doesn't have activity, the mind is affected. And if the mind is not properly engaged, especially by understanding of the actual goal of human life, then it'll be engaged improperly. And by being improperly engaged, there'll be mental diseases. So today, the World Health Organization is saying that, the greatest cause of death after a certain, in a few decades, is going to be mental diseases. It's going to take over heart problems and diabetes as the top reason for mortality, human mortality. So all these things actually, the things that the physical body requires activity, and one doesn't just need to use artificial intelligence and a few remotes here and there, and that'll actually have consequences. So when one leads simply, then all these activities, how one should act without interfering too much with nature, how our mind, how to engage the mind, how to educate ourselves in such a way that the mind is engaged not just on improving one's material circumstances, but focusing on the understanding of the purpose of life, which is not given by studying a lot of engineering and studying of the body. Only that will not give that understanding. So when or studying law or others, commerce or such things, these are not going to actually solve the problems of difficulties that human beings face. So there has to be an integrated approach or a holistic approach to life, and that is actually what the Vedic that is the recommendation in Vedic. That is how Vedic culture is organized, and now the system which is alternative to the Vedic culture is getting more and more complicated, because we have to fill such long forms for everything, and there is so much external regulations. These are again ways of regulation which are always necessary when society is in the lower stage of consciousness. They're actually leading to more and more complications, because the understanding of the actual purpose of life is not there. So self-regulation is missing. Self-regulation of the subtle body, that is mind, ego, and intelligence, and regulation of the gross body as well through activity, which are getting taken over by machines. So that balance, the balance of matter and spirit, that is first brought about in the lower stages of civilization through karmakanda activities. And then as one realizes, then one moves higher and higher up the scale of the karmakanda activities. And then varnashrama is not necessary, and one can reach the stage of Bhagavat. I mean, varnashrama, by leading life through this varna system, one is able to reach the stage of Bhagavat dharma. And then that is again another eternal principle where one is, moving towards realization, self-realization, and towards the highest goal of self-realization. And that doesn't require any kind of, this external kind of regulation, because the regulation is from within. One understands the purpose, one, acquires a higher taste. And so that is what actually inspires one to, pursue regulated life. So in this way, Krishna is countering Arjuna's argument that, it is karmakanda activities will be stopped, and then what will happen? Then society will degrade. So he's saying that, yes, you're right. At the lower stages, one is necessary. But then you are there. You are a prince. So you have to kind of take over and provide the conditions where people are able to work for their ultimate welfare while taking care of their material requirements. So then this argument where you are concerned does not apply. So this is not the highest purpose of human existence. So then here in the Purijana Dasa explaining further about the karmakanda activities, says that Acharya Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur has commented that in India, each well is used for only a specific purpose. Like the ancient India, like classical India, where Vedic culture was prevalent in all its purity at that time, sanctity of life was given a priority. And for that sanctity, it began with sanctity of the body and sanctity of the environment. So we talk of Swachh Bharat now, but this is kind of Swachh Bharat at the highest level. So like in the COVID situation, there's so much of washing and, drying, washing and cleaning and, cleaning hands and all that. So in the Vedic culture, the water was, what source of water were wells, and each well was used only for a specific purpose. That means the well for drinking water, one could only take drinking water from that well, and it was not used for any other purpose. Similarly, clothes were not washed in the well, near the wells, by drawing water from the wells, which was for drinking purposes. So even that, to that degree, they were conscious, because the water might, will percolate down and then enter the well. So the well would be polluted. So highest degree of purity, external purity and internal purity, was given a priority in classical India, Vedic India. And for cleaning utensils, there was a different well. And for bathing, there was a different well. So all these activities, however, can be performed simultaneously on the shore of a lake or a river, because these are not like static sources. These are large bodies, water bodies. So large water bodies, contamination would be less. And the river is always running. The water is always running. So therefore, all these activities in small wells performed, these are needs. One has to wash utensils, one has to drink water, one has to take a bath, one has to clean utensils. These are different needs, and these are fulfilled by going to different wells. So similarly, when the source of fresh water is available, we don't need to go from well to fulfill our purposes. So that source itself will fulfill all the requirements. So here, similarly, one who is Vijanata, that is what is said in this verse. It is said that Brahmanasya Vijanata, that means a man who knows, who is in complete knowledge, who understands Supreme Brahman. He doesn't need to go from well to well. He needs only to perform Buddhi Yoga. So these karmakanda activities, there are different kind of rituals. If you want economic gains, if you want money, there is a different karmakanda activity. If you want to do well in studies, there's a different kind of karma activity if you want to get married. So these are different wells. But all these different wells for fulfilling the material aspect of human life, these will automatically be fulfilled if one goes to a source where all these are available at one place. And this is like simply by performing Buddhi Yoga. That means performance of material activities in a regulated way, understanding the actual purpose of life, having jnana, that is Buddhi Yoga. And if one performs Buddhi Yoga, then, which is only done for the satisfaction of the Lord, when one does that, when one performs those activities, dovetails one's desires with the service to the Supreme Lord, automatically all the purpose of the Vedic karma kandas are anyways fulfilled, automatically fulfilled. So even one who has material desires but who performs Buddhi Yoga will become purified gradually, because it's so powerful. And because he's fixed in transcendental knowledge, in the power of transcendental knowledge, that is the knowledge which is beyond Traigunya Vishaya Veda, which is beyond like the three modes of material nature. And because Krishna has explained several alternative levels to Arjuna, he next explains the specific level on which Arjuna is qualified to act. So in the earlier parts, Lord Krishna has actually explained different levels of human consciousness, starting with the highest level, which is understanding what is actually existence and what is perishable and therefore is like a shadow and therefore should not be considered existence. So the difference between spirit and matter. And then he goes on to explain karmakanda activities, that is activities for fulfillment of, activities done according to one's dharma, but based on religious principles, to harness those intrinsic characteristics in such a way for a higher purpose. So, and then he goes on to explain the level of Buddhi Yoga, where he says that, actually doing just karma according to the prescriptions of Varna, Shrama, Dharma is not the highest. To do karma to be based on, to do karma activities is not the highest. One has to act on the platform of Buddhi Yoga. That means with the realization that all activities of life are for the pleasure of the Lord. And this is a transcendental stage of consciousness where gradually one is able to rise above the modes of material nature. And then, having explained these different levels of consciousness, now in the next verse, Lord Krishna is going to explain what is the level of consciousness, specific level, at which Arjuna is qualified to act or is required to act, because he's a statesman. He's someone who's going to run the country. So what level is he required to act upon will be explained from verse 47, which we will do in the next video, because this has become very long. So see you in the next video for verse 47.